Welcome back. Today I'll be going over chapter 1 of Ginger Alden's book, Elvis and Ginger. Ginger says some events in life make you question whether destiny is shaped by fate or simply by coincidence. For her family, it was the U.S. Army that set everything in motion. Okay, bear with me here in this chapter because I'm gonna mention a bunch of dates, but it's Ginger's leading up to how Elvis and her dad met for the first time. During World War II, Ginger's father, Walter, was drafted, and her mother, Jo Spencer, had joined the Women's Army Corps. They met at Fort Stewart in Georgia and married 2 years after. And then 11 months later, they had her brother Mike, and 5 years later, they had her sister Rosemary. When her father chose to continue his military career, the family settled in Memphis, Tennessee in 1951. In 1955, the year Ginger's sister Terry was born, her family lived in an apartment building on Getwell Road. They had no idea that Elvis only lived just a few blocks away. One day, Ginger's brother Mike was riding his bike along Stribling Street when a flatbed truck pulled up beside him, and to his surprise, it was Elvis. Elvis smiled at Mike, and he slowly drove away, and Mike pedaled after the truck down Dunn Avenue until Elvis turned off and disappeared from Mike's view. Later, Mike told his parents that quote, he probably smiled at me because I was staring at him. Ginger was born on November 13th, 1956 at the Naval Hospital in Millington, Tennessee. In 1957, Walter was a sergeant first class working in Army Public Relations and Recruitment. And he coordinated with the Memphis Draft Board to guide potential enlistees toward better opportunities. That same year, it was announced that Elvis Presley would likely be drafted, and that prompted every branch of the military to compete for his enlistment. Walter wanted to reach out to Elvis on behalf of the Army, so he went to Graceland, Elvis's newly purchased home, but he was told that Elvis wasn't there. Before Walter had the chance to go back, he learned that Elvis had chosen not to enlist voluntarily and would instead wait to be drafted. By the end of the year, Elvis had received his official induction notice into the U.S. Army. On March 24th, 1958, Elvis arrived with his parents, Gladys and Vernon, at the Memphis Draft Board office. And from there, he and the other draftees boarded a bus to Kennedy Veterans Hospital for their physicals. Soon after arriving, they went to a reception room and sat behind long tables. In that room, the soon-to-be Private Elvis Presley saw Walter for the first time. Her dad had entered the room to speak to the new recruits, offering a few words to prepare them for what was ahead. After he finished and began to pack up, Elvis approached Walter and asked if there was somewhere in the building where he could get change to use a payphone. Walter reached into his pocket and handed him a dime, and Elvis thanked him. Later that day, after completing his physical, Elvis was officially sworn into the U.S. Army. Because of Elvis's fame, the press closely followed the event, and photographers actually captured shots of Elvis standing with Walter for the newspapers. Ginger says, even now, whenever she looks at those old clippings, she's struck by the image. It's a young Elvis beside her dad. And she says, quote, they were worlds apart, yet at that moment they were connected for the first time. That evening, Walter came home carrying two publicity photos of Elvis, one signed to Mike and the other to Rosemary. Before going to bed, her dad wrote a note in her sister's little autograph book that read, quote, today I shook the hand of Elvis Presley, March 24th, 1958. Later that year, Elvis's mother, Gladys, had fallen ill, and in August, the Army had granted him emergency leave so that he could return to Memphis. Gladys unfortunately passed away on August 14th, 1958, and Elvis remained home for her funeral. After completing 24 months of active duty, Elvis came back to Memphis on March 7, 1960, this time as a civilian with 4 years remaining in the reserves. A few nights later, Walter decided to stop by Graceland after work. He was hoping to gather a few public relations notes for an Army newsletter. He parked his Army sedan near the driveway of Graceland and walked up to the closed gates where a small crowd of fans had gathered. From where he stood, he saw Elvis in the driveway with a few people, and Elvis was talking to a teenage boy whose hand was wrapped in a bandage. When Elvis noticed Walter in his army uniform still, he called out to the guard, "Let him in." Walter found out that a couple of nights earlier, Elvis had helped the teenage boy after a motorcycle accident near Graceland, and the boy had come back to thank him. She says it turned out to be lucky timing. Walter not only saw Elvis, but also came away with a great story. Over the following year, Walter stopped by Graceland a few more times, sometimes with a friend who was a reporter for the Memphis Press Scimitar, and was always on the lookout for Elvis-related stories. Walter and his reporter friend had become friendly with Travis Smith, the gate guard. Travis happened to be Elvis's uncle. One evening, Travis invited Ginger's parents, Walter and Joe, to join Elvis at a private movie screening at the Memphian. The Memphian is where Elvis often watched films away from the public eye. As instructed, her parents drove to Graceland and waited in their car near the front gates. A short while later, several cars came out from behind the mansion, and as the small convoy left the driveway, her father pulled in behind them to follow. Ginger says that it was well past midnight when her parents pulled up to the theater, which was close to the public, and they spotted Elvis outside chatting with a small group of people and walked over to him. When Elvis recognized Walter, he greeted him warmly with a handshake, and Walter introduced Elvis to Joe. The group headed into the theater lobby, and while Elvis stopped by a concession stand, her parents and the other guests went inside to find seats. A few moments later, Elvis strolled down the aisle carrying a bucket of popcorn, and spotting Walter, he called out playfully, "Hey, Sarge, I'm ready to go back into the Army." Her dad laughed and he said, "We'll be glad to have you back." They watched a couple of movies that night, and it wasn't until the early morning hours that everyone finally left the theater. Not long after Travis invited Ginger's parents to another special event, Elvis had rented out the Memphis Fairgrounds amusement park and had encouraged friends and guests to invite their children. Travis and his wife would be attending, and Travis told Walter when and where to meet once the park had been closed to the public. Ginger was 5 years old, and she joined her family for the outing. She says that she was too young to remember every detail, but the experience became an unforgettable moment for all of them. She says the security guard let them through the amusement park gate where they sat in their car and waited. Travis soon arrived and introduced his wife, Lorraine, to Ginger's parents, and then a short while later, a black car slowly approached the entrance and the guard waved the car through. When it stopped, Elvis stepped out, and he was wearing a dark shirt and pants paired with a white captain's hat. Ginger says that her clearest memory of that night was watching Elvis shake hands with people and realizing how important he must be. She says his face looked exactly like the one she'd seen on record covers at home. Her parents greeted Elvis, and her father introduced each family member. Elvis shook hands with Mike and Rosemary, then gently patted Terry and Ginger on their heads. When Joe mentioned to Elvis that Mike had started guitar lessons, Elvis laughed and said, quote, "I've got one at home he can have because I can't play the thing." Everyone laughed, and then the group followed Elvis into the park toward a big wooden roller coaster, one of his all-time favorite rides. And Elvis climbed into the front car with his date, Bonnie Bunkley, and the others found their seats. Travis turned to Ginger's mom, Joe, and asked, while smiling, "Want to ride with me?" Joe had never ridden a roller coaster before, so she agreed, but on the condition that Travis pick a seat that wasn't too scary. Travis chose the last seat on the roller coaster, which, of course, has a reputation for being the roughest, and Joe was unaware of this. When the ride was done, Joe told Travis, "I think I might just have a heart attack right here." Elvis spent the evening walking through the park with his date and a few friends, and Ginger's parents took her and her sisters to the kiddie rides. He says a concession stand was open for everyone, and they were free to enjoy the rides as many times as they liked. She says the magical night came to an end all too soon, and her parents found Travis and Elvis. They thanked them both for such an unforgettable evening. Her brother Mike and his friend begged their parents to stay longer. And she says that they didn't make it home until almost sunrise. Mike told their parents later how Elvis and his friends had split into teams for the bumper cars, and how Elvis even had he sent someone to fetch milkshakes from the Polar Bear frozen custard shop across the street. At the time, Ginger didn't realize it, but that night, she says, was just a glimpse of Elvis's generous spirit. That's it for chapter 1. Stay tuned for chapter 2, where Ginger talks about her upbringing and also the first time she saw Elvis in concert. See you then.